Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We can have a roll call, please.
Trustee Marquez. Here. Trustee Weekly.
Present.
Trustee McAvoy joining. Absent. Vice President Wells.
Here.
President Lawson.
Here. Just to clarify for the audience, Elisa McAvoy is not in the boardroom, and she's going to be participating as a panelist, where she can, as a guest, and will not be participating in the votes tonight. Report out on closed session from February 28th, 2024. The board received information and no action was taken. Let's see, where are we? Si necesita traducción en español, por favor, llama al 978-890-5137 y presione 8377041 el signo de número para la contraseña. The public is encouraged to speak to the board on issues of concern, whether or not the issue is on the agenda. To address the board, please complete a speaker's card available at the entrance of the room or online. There's a Google Doc attached to the agenda. If you wish to speak to the board on a subject listed on the agenda, you'll be called at the time the item is being considered by the board. If the item is not on the agenda, you'll be called on during oral communication. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic, unless otherwise noted. Okay, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yeah, I wanted to propose that we move the LCAP update 13.1 to earlier in the agenda, right after 9.1, the parcel tax discussion.
So right above consent. Is that all right with everybody? With that? Okay. Any other changes? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We have a couple of items for oral communication. Is this all that we have? Okay. So our first speaker, I don't even know if she's on. Okay, our first speaker is Elizabeth Flegel. If you're here, can you raise your hand? I don't see her. Our other speaker is Siglinda Lemus, and I don't see that either. Are either of our speaker cards present in the audience online or in person?
Flegel just joined.
Elizabeth Flegel just joined. Okay, Elizabeth, I know you just hopped in, but we're on oral communication now. So we could give her ability to speak. Okay, hi Elizabeth, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I had difficulty signing in. Well, good evening, Dr. Baker and members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment. I did send a letter earlier today, but I also just wanted to speak in person because it's more personable. But I'd like to speak about, I'm a 4th grade parent at Adelante Selby. And I've heard mentioned that we may be losing funding for yard duty, instructional assistance, STEAM, and music next year, and of other cuts. In particular, one that worries me the most is that we may be cutting, the district may be cutting a full-time teacher. And I've heard that 3 of our 4th grade classrooms might be consolidated into 2. And that to keep the class size below 31 students, that some children would actually be asked to leave the school. And I just wanted to voice my opinion as a parent that I really feel that this proposal would hurt our children, particularly the more vulnerable ones. And I hope that you can and will make it a priority to help to keep the teachers that we have and allow them to maintain the smaller class sizes, which we've really benefited from the last few years. I actually have 2 children who went through Adelante, and my current 4th grader is really, frankly, a very neurotypical learner, and school is pretty easy for her. But I do know what it's like to have a child that struggles in school, and children can struggle for a whole wide variety of reasons. And I know how much that those children who don't have the optimal resources and ability to learn easily in a school setting, that how much they benefit from extra attention from their teachers. So I hope that you will consider keeping 3 fifth-grade teachers next year. I think increasing the class size from 22 to 31 will really dramatically reduce the attention that teachers can give to students in need. And I also wanted to say, because I have heard a few times quoted that there may be some studies showing that small class size doesn't always improve learning outcomes. I don't know if this is factoring into the decisions that are being made, but I did want to voice again that this is really contrary to my personal experience. And I did spend some time looking for studies. I'm a scientist, so I do believe pretty adamantly in the scientific method. And what I found, and maybe there are other ones, but the ones that I found really were skewed by a lack of qualified teachers, which wouldn't necessarily surprise me if you had smaller number of kids in a classroom with an unqualified teacher, that those learning outcomes might not improve. But really, that's not the situation we have at Adelante. And I took a look at the school accountability report card that Dr. Baker sent out a couple weeks ago. And I couldn't help but notice that the gains the students are making at Adelante are far exceeding the state and even the district overall. There was a 30% improvement in students meeting or exceeding state standards in language and a 22% improvement in math. And I just really hope, again, that you will consider the impacts to our students and also to our teachers about eliminating a full-time position and how that might impact our most vulnerable students. And also just that asking children to leave.
That's 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
I'm
Bye.
sure you know that with oral communication, we can't have like a back and forth discussion, but I would encourage you to at least stay on through our next item. I think that we'll probably address some of your questions during that item.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. I think, so I'm still looking for Siglinda. And it doesn't look like, I don't see that name anywhere. So we'll go ahead and take Jessica Shade. Oh, is that, oh, sorry, that's the wrong item. Okay, both of these are the different items. Okay, so then we can move on to 9.1.
So is Ms. Coomer on by any chance? I don't.
Yes.
She is perfect because I have her presentation. I don't have, so I'm on a different screen. So at this point in time, what we wanted to do, Joy Coomer is here. Joy Coomer is with Team Civic X, and she is going to give us some information in regarding the possibility and the feasibility of us moving forward with a possible parcel tax. Now, I just want to make sure that the audience and everyone knows that board has not made a decision to move forward yet. This is the beginning to determine if it's feasible. If it is feasible, then there is other work that needs to occur, such as a poll of our community, if they will be in favor of going in that direction. So with that being said, Joy, I have your presentation. So do I have access to, Carlos, can you give me host access or somebody so I can, hopefully this. Do I have it?
And then if you go to Zoom.
I went outside of this. There I am. Yeah, here I am.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Joy Coomer with Team Civics, as the superintendent introduced me. I've worked with and know many of you from some of the previous work that we've done with the district over time. Formerly, our company had other names, but some of our partners, and myself included, split from the old company and formed the new company, Team Civics, mostly because really we felt like we wanted to really have a focus on ballot measures that impact communities. So a little bit about our firm. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. It may have to slide down.
I think you want to just.
I'll slide it. Just tell me next and I'll move forward.
Okay, sounds great. So we really do the same work that we did previously. We do strategy and communications about ballot measures around the state. I've worked with your district over several different years, and I'll kind of speak to that on the next slide. But, you know, really we aim to work really closely with not only your district, but also your public opinion research firm, your legal counsel, and other experts to help us have a good understanding of the needs facing the district and what steps we might look at. So we look at the feasibility of a measure. And what we mean by that is if you were to put something on the ballot, such as a parcel tax measure, would it have a reasonable success of passing in an upcoming election? The next available election for the district would be November of 2024. Parcel taxes are unique in that they can go on off-year elections, which is different than bond measures. But in the upcoming slides, I'll say, you know, a few words about why this November might be a good one for you to consider. That is part of the work that we do. We really help you see what is the best election date for you, what tax rate would work well for the community. Where do we see an alignment in the values and the needs? So of the things that you need done and the priorities that you need to fill, and I think the previous speaker really, you know, hit on some of those things, the retention of teachers and specialists, and how do those priorities align with your community? Really to help make sure that we're building the best measure that serves the district and the community. We help, you know, should we see feasibility, we help develop the measure and qualify it for the ballot. And we really work to help tell the story to the community about why you are considering a potential funding measure, such as a parcel tax. Next slide. I thought it would be helpful just to see the information here of your previous attempts of going out at a potential measure. So you do have the parcel tax, that is your most recent one, Measure U, which was passed in November of 2016. So also a presidential election year. It was $85 for 14 years. It passed at 79.81%. There was a very big interest from community members who stepped up and spent a lot of time working on that. The previous parcel tax it replaced was Measure W, which was $67 for 5 years. And it also passed well above the threshold for passage, which is 2/3 or 66.7%. You can see Measure W passed at 69.2. The district also looked at a larger parcel tax in 2019, Measure 8. It was for $149 for 12 years. It nearly passed. It fell short by just a few votes. It got to 66 point, I can't remember now, but it was like 66.4%. So just a very few votes shy of passing. The two bond measures that the district has passed recently were in 2015 and 2022. And the information there is also, you know, pretty consistent with strong support for the district, really showing up both in the bonds and in the parcel taxes. Next slide, please. So this takes a look at your district overall. You have a very strong voting community. We expect that this November, you would see a likely turnout of about 84%. That's based on past information that we have about past voting history and how people have shown up at the polls in previous presidential elections. There is a little over 48,600 registered voters in the district that reside within 25,843 households. 58% of all your registered voters are Democratic. Republican voters make up 14%, and then 28% is all others. Most of that 28% would be independents. There are also a few other minor party folks in there as well, such as the Green Party or Peace and Freedom are some examples, but the majority of them really are independent voters. The other striking thing in your district, which we do see quite a bit across California though, is the age makeup of your voters. And you'll see that the smallest percentage is those youngest voters, 18 to 24. That's pretty common in most districts around the state. Younger students are moving around, going to college, following different job opportunities. There is a strong and growing percentage that we have seen of that 25 to 54 age range. You can see they're making up almost half of all your voters now. So again, families moving in, that's sort of that family age range, that 25 to 54. And so we have seen some modest gains in those areas. But you can still see 23% of your registered voters are over the age of 65. So not likely as connected to the schools as maybe some of those parent age voters, with another 16% between the ages of 55 and 64, which are probably families that are transitioning out of your district, maybe into the high school district, or just seeing their students move on to other opportunities. And then just finally, a quick look at the ethnicity of your registered voters. We break those out. You do have a strong Latino population. Also, just about 8% of those in the AAPI category. But your registered voters of all others is still about 67%, with a large majority of that being Caucasian, or those who identify as Caucasian on the voter rolls. Next slide, please. So your polling firm throughout all of these measures has always been Godby Research. And I brought some slides from him just to share a little bit about his background, especially for those of you who may not have gone through this process before. The first step that we would recommend in considering a potential parcel tax measure that would help fund the general, would help fund some of those important programs, would be to do a survey of likely voters in the district to see where we would be in support of a potential parcel tax measure. Godby Research has been based in San Mateo County and worked with the district for many, many years. They've worked with over 300 school districts since 2010. There's more information there. Brian Godby, who is the president and principal researcher, he would be involved in the process from the beginning and would actually join the board meeting similar to this so that he could present those results and you'd have that information. Next slide. These are all the San Mateo County school districts that he has worked with and worked with on successful bond or parcel tax measures. So you can see his breadth of experience in the district is pretty broad. Next slide, please. And this is meant to represent his process. We work collaboratively together. We start right there with the kickoff meeting, a meeting with school district officials and perhaps a subcommittee, looking at existing data, drafting the survey, doing the pre-testing. Then the survey would be fielded. Our goal would be to do that sometime between, in the next month in March and April. Then you would have an opportunity to hear those results, find out if there is support in the community for a potential parcel tax measure. And that would be then presented to you here at a public board meeting where you could make a decision about whether or not to move forward. Next slide, please. So the survey typically has a certain process that helps us identify how supportive the community would be. And it's meant to test a lot of different things in the survey to give you a good idea. in the beginning, people hear the ballot test, that 75-word question, right from the start without a lot of information. And that's to gauge their initial support of something as if they showed up on the poll, showed up to vote, and they had not read anything about your potential measure. It gives us a clear idea of where natural support starts. In the next phase of the survey, we have an opportunity to tell people a little bit more about the projects and programs. So, for example, we could specify what types of programs that this would support, such as teachers, reading specialists, counselors. Those very specific things would be tested in that part of it. Then we come back and ask people again, would they, now that they've heard more, would they be supportive? We then switch and we put on a hat of, we want to make sure that people hear critical statements too. We don't want to just hear what everybody would think if they only heard all the positive things. We also talk about, struggles with the economy. Maybe now isn't the right time. And we put those things in to see and give it a little bit of a stress test and see how that impacts the ballot measure. And so then they hear that again the final time. And that gives us a really clear indication of how support changes over time and what types of things, depending on what people hear, if it really changes their mind. There's also an opportunity to test alternative tax rates, and then just take a look at the demographics and voting behavior of a lot of the voters. And again, Brian would come back and present that data for you so that you'd have a very clear picture of that. Next slide, please. He wanted to break down the voters a little bit differently than I did before. And I think this is really helpful. The survey is conducted in multi-languages to give everybody an opportunity to participate. When he looks at all of your voters, he's looking at how many people have landlines. And you can see only 38% of your over 48,600 registered voters have landlines. There's just not many people who have landlines anymore. 54% though of your voters do have emails, and 38% have cell phones. So the way they conduct these surveys now, and in fact, this was the way the bond survey was done, is initially he will reach out to voters through emails and through cell phones, and they'll receive a text invitation, which will invite them to go online and take the survey online. That's meant to capture those voters who have those cell phones and emails, and it really helps us get a clearer picture and be able to reach more voters. Then secondly, they'll do the telephone survey. Sometimes those things happen nearly simultaneously with just a little bit of gap in between. And that allows us to reach voters who have landlines on those landlines, and they'll be able to take the survey over the phone. Again, it'll be offered in both Spanish and English, so you'll have a very clear idea of how all your registered voters feel about this particular ballot measure. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take a moment finally, in conclusion, to talk about an overall timeline. What would it look like if you were to move forward? Right now, we're really only in the feasibility stage. This is a really clear and helpful visual because the blue arrows are meant to represent those things that the district can do. When the color changes and the arrow becomes gold, that's part of the independent campaign work. This helps us really focus on those things that the district can do as part of this process. So as a reminder, parcel taxes can fund, the money goes into the general fund, and it can fund those things like attracting and retaining teachers, providing funding to be able to do programs such as reading specialists and counselors. Those are the types of things supporting academic programs that parcel tax funds usually are for. It does require 2/3 for passage. 66.7% of voters who are participating in that particular election. Our first step would really be this feasibility step. We would recommend that the board consider bringing Brian Godby and myself back to work on a voter survey with your district to figure out what is the right amount to test to help support the programs that you're interested in protecting. Take a look at that tax rate and what other things are likely to be on the ballot at the same time. We'd then bring that voter survey and those results back to the board to hear those results and ultimately make a decision about whether to move forward with awareness building and actually putting a ballot measure together. The deadline that we have to keep in mind throughout all of this is the August 9th deadline. That's when a resolution would be needing to be delivered to the Register of Voters in order to qualify for the November of 2024 ballot. So with that, I'll pause here and Superintendent Baker, please feel free to pull this down. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have more comments that you'd like to share, I can take a break here.
Thank you, Joy. Did you want to follow up with something or there?
Just to, reiterate, right now, this is information. If we determine to move in a direction with a feasibility study, it would come back to you most likely next week so that we can start moving a contract. And then we would go from there, as you saw on the one slide, of the different types of activities that would go into play so that we could move forward and get everything done prior to, I believe, the August 9th date, where we get the resolution and ballot language and everything is taken care of with the voter registration office.
So I have a question on that. I don't think we've seen our meeting schedule for next school year. Would we be meeting August 7th or would we be looking at a June 26th resolution?
Joy and I had talked about that. We could do either. We could do either at that point in time. We would just need to make sure that our initial items that we are certain about for that last meeting in June, to make sure that they are there. And if you prefer and you want to wait, which we wouldn't need to, we could have it on the August 7th. I think in the last time for the last bond measure, we came right up to a couple days prior to it had to be at the registrar's office.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it was in August.
I don't remember which one.
Yes.
Wasn't
Go
that
ahead, Joy, 'cause I know we've done some in June before we went on break.
Yes, I think the last measure was done in August, right before the deadline, and it just allowed us a little more time since a lot of families were gone over the summer. We could kind of revisit it once school, was getting back ready to start again, back ready and start. And it just allowed a little more time for the district to do some of those initial communications. Most of the work will honestly be done by then. We would likely bring a resolution to the board sometime in June or share it with you beforehand so that you'd have an opportunity to review it well ahead of the August deadline. And we'd also have plenty of opportunity to hear from the community and gather their feedback as well. I think the feasibility would be that first step, really seeing if there is interest from the community in supporting a potential parcel tax.
Board?
You want us to ask questions?
What do we want to do? We do have two speakers cards too, but we can.
I mean, I just had a quick clarifying question on the feasibility study. Like, how much does a feasibility study cost, and is that paid for by the district?
We actually have some dollars, and one of our board members has been looking into the amount of money that is left from the last, from the bond that we did last go around. Is that correct, Lisa?
campaign committee.
The campaign committee, I mean, and she was going, if I can let Elisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't yet found out about that, but I think legally the district can pay for the feasibility study. there has been times when both our district and some other districts choose to use private funds if that's available. So I am trying to follow up with the campaign committee from the bond and find out how much money is there and whether the campaign committee would be willing to pay for either some or all of the feasibility study, but I don't have that information yet.
Okay, and then one other
Yeah.
question, and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to say the district did pay for the bond feasibility study, so that was paid for by the district. So it has been done in different ways in the past, paying for it, but it is an allowable expense for the district. And if I were to ballpark it, it would be very hard because it's for Brian, right? They set their own amounts, but I would definitely say it's probably, if I were to put an estimate out there, it would be under 40,000. It's probably somewhere between 30 and 40. The cost to translate and dial each phone has just significantly gone up, and so that probably is pretty similar to what the district paid in 2022 as well.
Yeah, that's what I kind of remembered from the bond before. And then I know you said this, but I'm just gonna double check. The feasibility study will cover other items that might be on the ballot, as well as sort of the appetite for how much the parcel tax could go for and what people's support would be for it. That's kind of the information we're trying to get out of it.
Yes, you could certainly test different dollar amounts. I honestly recommend looking at I think that it's important to voters that they understand how it ties back to the need. And so, right, there is, it isn't about like how much can we get? It's really how much do we need? I just don't see appetite right now in this economy for people to be looking at things that would be nice to have. And I mean, I understand your needs are not nice to have, they are immediate needs. And so my recommendation would be to track closely to help cover those expenses.
So I feel sort of like there's two separate but related questions here. One is, should we pursue feasibility to understand whether or not we should put a parcel tax measure on the ballot? And there's a second one, which is what vendor should we use for performing that feasibility analysis? We've received a presentation here today from one vendor. Are there others available? Have we already done that? Is there a bidding process? What are next steps there?
This district has, in my experience, we've used these vendors that you've seen the presentation from tonight. Godby has been working with us since the superintendent prior to myself, and I think the superintendent prior to her.
Yep.
And I know Joy's been with us for quite a while. I think it was with Jam, but I don't know if it was with Ron Kreitz or not at that point in time. I think it may have been someone else.
Someone from our firm has worked with the district on all the ballot measures, but yes, I've been involved in and know many members of the community and have worked very closely with a lot of different parents in the district. There are other people who do what I do, and so obviously if that's important to the district, but I would say I certainly know your community and your district very well.
Mhm.
And I think over the years, I've gained a lot of trust from many of the parents and your foundations and others. And so hopefully that would be part of the consideration. But
Absolutely. The question was not asked out of a place of skepticism, but rather like when, for any large expense, we should consider, are there
yes,
vendors that can offer the service, and have we done a diligent job of looking at the options?
And our neighboring districts and my colleagues have all gone with
Sure.
with
Good.
Joy's previous company and also with Godby.
Thank you.
Oh,
Alyssa has
I
her
don't know if
hand.
this is a good time to point out, but that's actually less than the amount that Dr. Baker's, what's the word I'm looking for? Authorized to approve without board approval.
and I don't have any questions, but a comment. Thank you, Joy, for the presentation. When we talk about when we're gonna think about going out to our community, and we talk about in June, they're already going on vacation, but August 7th is right before we come back from break. I'm assuming that obviously you guys have thought about it and know strategies, but I'm just wondering, is it better to catch our community right before they go on break or when they're still on break? So I thought it was not going to be a question, but I guess it is.
No, that's a good question. So I think of it as two ways. While you are still considering it and before the board has voted, the district is allowed to do informational communications. And so right up until the last day of school and even a little bit in the summer, right? We would be doing, if it were feasible, we would work with the district to put together a communication plan and execute that communication plan that made sense for your community at large and your school district. The advantage of waiting, if there is an advantage to waiting to August, it just gives you a little more time to see if something changes. And my best example of this is unfortunately COVID, right? Many people did surveys and voted to put measures on the ballot in December of 2019. And the world was an incredibly different place by the time we got to the March ballot. And oftentimes things happen. And if you vote in June to put it on the ballot and something drastically changes, you wouldn't be able to move it off of the ballot. And so you would still be stuck on the ballot. And right, so the world could change again. And just the more time we have before you vote, it does sort of help you in that way. It helps you understand the environment and be sure that we have all the information so that you as a board are making the best decision. Once the board votes, the district can always provide information about a measure. You can always say, the board voted to put this on the ballot. Here is how much it would cost. Here are the programs it would fund. And here are the things we would not be able to do if this does not pass. But you can't advocate for it. So no matter what, once you vote to put something on the ballot, it has to transition to an independent campaign committee. And it'll be that job of the independent campaign committee to really educate the community at that point. Your job is really just providing the facts once you vote to put it on the ballot. So I do feel like there is some advantage to waiting to August, just so that it gives you more information as a board to make the best decision for your district and for your community.
Go ahead, Elisa. Oh, sorry, you were done, okay.
Yeah, I can wait until all the board members have had it, who are in person, had a chance to talk. Like, go ahead, or you guys
Or
have-
what were you gonna do? I was just asking the questions, but
Well-
I don't know, did you want comments now, or did you want to do public comment and then do board comments?
Well, we can finish up with our comments and
Okay.
circle back if we have more after.
I mean, I'm happy to say that I think we should do the feasibility study. I think that we should pursue it with civics and Godby. Thank you, Joy, for coming and presenting tonight. I really appreciate the information. You know, I really wish that the state of California and the federal government fully funded schools, because we know that there's so much more needed beyond just a classroom teacher, office staff, kitchen staff, you know, maintenance and et cetera, to provide an education. You know, we're going to hear in our next agenda item about all the extra programs that we're using to support our kids that are funded through the LCAP, but actually are coming from, you know, a lot of sources that come through that. We talk about MTSS TOSAs, and they're working on addressing, say, like chronic absenteeism, which we know is a priority across the state. Mental health counseling and the tier 1 support that they're able to provide, plus the tier 2 and tier 3 interventions and support that they bring in, the newcomer programming, and all the work that happens for our English learners and our emerging bilingual students, you know, and the additional funding for the literacy and the reading intervention teachers, tutoring, whether that's coming from our district teachers or whether it's coming from partners like College Advisory Prep. And then there's all the stuff that's not even in the LCAP that we're not even going to talk about the rest of tonight, like the extra supports for our students with IEPs, that they need and deserve. That's part of our commitment to provide a free and public education. Our special education costs is like 20%, nearly 20% of the general fund budget. Our rich community schools and other programs that provide, much needed wraparound support for so many students and their families. And there's many more that I can't remember off the top of my head. And, really the sad truth is that our schools are underinvested here in Redwood City and across the state. Both in terms of funding for capital improvements and funding for operating the programs that, research has really shown has been effective in ensuring that students have the best chance to succeed both socially and academically. And I know that Redwood City School District and really all districts have been pretty fortunate the last couple of years. We've had an influx of one-time funding, and they've really been able to offer many of the programs that we've talked about there and we'll talk about later tonight. But, those funds are ending or they've already ended. And the reality is that here in California, there's really limited sources of funding that school districts can tap into for these needed programs. Local funding is one of those options. Last year, I guess almost 2 years ago now, the Redwood City voters supported the bond measure to help for the capital projects to ensure that our students in the district, have the safe and updated environments to learn in. Now with these one-time operational funding ending, we need to find a way to continue these programs. They proved so valuable. And I think many of us, we've heard it through emails from families, speakers, and I think we just know in our hearts, we'd hate to see some of these end. We need to find a way to continue them. They're expensive to operate because they really do rely on people. And, it's expensive to live in this area. I think I saw it on the California Housing Consortium site that San Mateo County is one of the top 5 expensive counties for housing, possibly in the nation. It was definitely in the state. I can't remember. It was.
I thought it was #1 in the state.
Maybe it's #1 in the state. I mean, it's these things are demanding. They're demanding on the revenue. And so, yeah, I think we should be pursuing additional funding. We should go forward with the feasibility study. I support taking it to the next step. And, seeing if this is something that we think as the board is the best interest for our community and for the school district.
Elisa, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I think Mike covered a lot of what I was thinking about. Thank you, Mike. That was a great kind of summary of kind of where we're at. I did want to speak to David. Thank you for, well, first of all, Joy, thank you for the presentation. It was good to get a reminder of kind of timelines and how it all works. I've been around now for a number of the parcel taxes and bond measures over the last 17 years. And I did want to say, David, thank you for the question around vendor selection, because I think it's always important for us to be mindful of that. I did want to mention that prior to bringing on, at the time it was TBWB, but now it's some of the same folks have created Team Civics, including Joy. We did have a different vendor who we were really unhappy with. And I will say that I make a point of, at the CSBA annual conferences and also with my colleagues just around the Bay Area and the state, checking in on other vendors that are out there. And there certainly are some other vendors, but frankly, I don't think any of them are as good or would know us as well, our local community. And that's something that has proven well for us. One of the things that I think saves us money by using someone like Joy who knows us is that they have a lot of data already on us, and so they can sort of pick up on what they know and then just sort of update it. So that's helpful. And then I would also just say, I think Godby has a really good record with us and giving us good data with that, always that plus and minus percentage that we have to think about. So I won't go over all the things that Mike said, but I did want to mention that I think just this past week, the board, this is for the audience benefit, but the board has gotten a number of emails and texts and phone calls from parents and community members and from our teachers and our amazing staff, very concerned about the rumblings around budget cuts. And we know that, the revenue that we got from the stimulus money and the state and federal grants is going away or has gone away, as Mike said. And so we are going to need to do budget cuts. And so when we think about additional revenue that can offset that, you know, we really have very few choices. And it really is a parcel tax. It's finding additional donations and grant monies. And I know that Dr. Baker and many of the staff at Redwood City and some of us board members are looking for those donations and that sort of thing. But, you know, really a parcel tax measure where the community works with you to bring in additional revenue is important. And it just pains me when I get these messages from parents and staff about how important some of these positions are, like around attract and retain, around class size reduction, around STEAM, counselors, you know, reading resource, all those sorts of things. So I too, along with Mike, would agree that I think we ought to move forward with the polling and the feasibility study, because we need to find out what our community thinks. And then we can have another conversation about whether or not we go forward, but I would support that. And I should just say I'm attending and commenting as an audience member, so I'm not in my official capacity tonight, but I think I'm always wearing my board member hat, so there you go.
I think it's great. Thank you so much for the presentation, Joy. I do appreciate it. And the way that the job of the district gets done is through our teachers and through our staff. And the way that gets funded, like Alyssa said, is if we're looking for supplementary sources of funding, this is going to be on a very short list of ways to do that. Folks in the audience may not realize that the bond measures that we raised are strictly for building and capital improvements. Sometimes people can look at the figures raised in those large numbers and can't we just use this to go and pay the teachers and hire staff that's needed? And the answer is no. It's encumbered in that way. It's just for facilities. So I think it's fantastic that the voters and taxpayers have passed these measures to enable us to improve our facilities. Now we have the human beings in those facilities that we need to support to deliver great education to our students. So I'm definitely in support of our investigating a parcel tax measure here.
Do we want to take public comments? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Jessica Shade.
There's a
If
button
you
to
can press
press
the.
on the right. There you
Yep,
go.
you got it.
Thanks. Thank you so much for letting me comment today. I am commenting in support of the potential parcel tax. I am a parent of 2 students at Orion, a TK student and a second grade student. So, you know, the last few years, our district has really benefited from the COVID stimulus funds, which we've used to fund mental health counselors, reading specialists, class aides, ESL support, and a lot more. And I also know that these funds are going away this year, which breaks my heart because my students, as well as many of their friends and classmates, have benefited from these services. And a parcel tax is absolutely critical to fill the gap that's left by these funds that are going away, to make sure that we can afford the staff that our students need. I'm also excited about the other staff that we could support with a parcel tax. So STEAM instructors, reducing class sizes. You know, we heard from a parent earlier concerned about class size and about teacher retention, and a parcel tax would solve those really difficult budgetary decisions that the district is going to have to make and ensure that our students have the resources and support to be successful. So just one parent's voice of support and excitement for a parcel tax.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next speaker is online Brandon Matthews. Got his hand raised. Hi, there you go. Hi, Brandon.
Hi, good evening. I'm apologize for not having any sort of prepared notes. I found out about this meeting at the last minute. I am a homeowner in Redwood City. and I'm also a parent of a kindergartner at Adelante Selby. And I very briefly want to voice my support for progressing as quickly as possible toward a parcel tax to support our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So I'll just make my comment quick because I think between, oh, do we have another one? Oh, I won't make my comment yet. Elizabeth Flagel. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi again, thanks for letting me speak. And for pointing out this item is coming up next. I did see it on the agenda and I'm very glad again to see it. I had a couple of, I guess, suggestions. Having been on the Adelante Selby PTO board at the time when we voted to donate significantly from our budget to the Measure H campaign, and serving on the campaign myself, making phone calls, and it was really devastating when that parcel tax lost by, I believe it was fewer than 200 votes. So I guess I just wanted to ask, are there some lessons learned that will be looked at? Because there were significant online trolling comments that I think heavily swayed some of the voters. And I know that 66.7% is a very difficult threshold to reach. So I support it, and I'm really glad that you are considering a feasibility study. But I do hope that there will be some specifics looked into how we can avoid what happened last time. So, and also, I'd also like to make a note that nowhere on the virtual speaker card website does it say you have to be logged in. And the second commenter on the previous item was a fellow parent at my school who was unable to log in to a Zoom account to make a comment. So just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think as Joy pointed out, anything after the resolution is passed would have to come from the citizen-led campaign, right? So any addressing, anything that's happening online would have to be through the campaign and volunteers. Would you agree with that, Joy? I'm seeing nodding, yeah. Yeah. So I think my thoughts on this were summed up by Mike and Elisa. We've been saying for years that we know that one-time money was going away. We've seen what we can do in a school district when the state fully funds us, if you want to call that fully funded. It was nicely funded, let's say that. It's painful to make cuts. We knew that we were going to have to once that money came in, and we said, these are wonderful things we're doing with it. How are we going to go forward? Without that money, we can't. And so as everyone said, this is our one shot really at making up that money that we're going to be losing, that we have lost. So I'm very much in favor of a feasibility study for sure. I think we heard from Mike and David.
I didn't say it, but I
Yeah.
obviously do support it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not an action item.
No, it's not an action item. So what I will do is Joy and I will meet and then I will bring something back to you next week.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you so much.
Great. We moved item 13.1 up, so that is next on the agenda. So that is the annual update to the LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan.
Nancy's head.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Baker and cabinet and our audience. First of all, I want to just acknowledge this report is been put together by many different people. So I want to acknowledge Ed Services team, and some of them are here tonight to help present their sections. But also we had to gather information from our principals, our reading intervention teachers, which I very much appreciate them providing us the information for some of the reading intervention slides that are on here, so that we have, current data on what has been happening. Some of the data that we're going to be presenting tonight really comes to up to December, when the first interim, so that you guys are aware that it is from August to December, many of the slides that we are presenting tonight. Okay, so this is the mid-year report. And so we're just going to go over quickly about, what is the LCAP, our goals, goal 1, our attendance, suspensions, and our mental health. We will not be doing SPED tonight. Sorry that I put that on there, should have taken it off. But then goal 2, newcomer program, our data, our ELD, our reclassification, and our long-term English learners and how we're doing. And then our goal 3, we're not presenting tonight, iReady and CAS because you heard that back in January. And back at the beginning of the year. So we're going to be doing reading intervention, our district tutoring, and our CAP tutoring, multiple things that we have going on in the district that we are funded through to see our student progress. So as you know, the LCAP is a 3-year plan. We are in our 3rd year currently, completing our 3rd year. And so we are really going over and reviewing our goals, our services, and all of our actions and expenditures currently in this process. So this mid-year report allows us to see where we're at this day and time of the time frame. And then we will hear again at the end of the year, the full year report of how we've done on all these action services. And as well as begin process of the new LCAP. So our LCAP for our audience really documents and communicates to our internal and external stakeholders how our district is really operationalizing on the equity and what we're doing to support our students. So in our equity document here, you have 2, we have right now 22-23, and then there's a comparison of the current year. And so on the next slide is our comparison. So one of the differences that you see is that we have a different objective enrollment, in total about 157 students. Our unduplicated students is about 110 of the differences between the 2 years, with the highest schools of having unduplicated pupils being Hoover, Kennedy, MIT, and Adelante. So these are our LCAP. So these are links to our LCAP of both in English and Spanish, which are also on our website of the district plan for the 3 years. So our goals, these are our LCAP goals that we're looking at. Number 1 is really looking at every student, how they're succeeding on the MTSS supports, social emotional. So on goal number 1 tonight, we will be listening to Mr. Perez on working on attendance and suspensions, as well as our mental health with Ana Paula Garay, who will be presenting that information tonight. On goal number 2, it's about our English learners and seeing how their progress is. So Catherine Rivera, who is our multilingual director, will be presenting the information on goal 2. And then on goal 3, it's about how we're doing our English language arts and math, and what we're currently doing to help support our students in all of the interventions we're providing currently in the district. So I will be presenting on that. So goal number 1 is about how we have many goals. And so I put in some of the goals here of where we're at currently. One of the things I want to highlight is, and when you look at our SARC report, which is really how many of our credentialed teachers we have, we are at 71.8% this year. As you all know, we did have to go out internationally to hire new staffing. Wendy, Ms. Kelly did a lot of hard work and trying to make sure we had 100% filled positions this year. So, but it's still, there are teachers that we have that are uncredentialed. And so that is a continued work, and that's just not us, but it's across the state. So you can see that we've met many of our other indicators on the SARC. As we're looking at our absenteeism and our attendance and pupil, you can see that up to December, we have made some gains, as we know on our dashboard as well, that the chronic absenteeism rate, we have made some improvements. We're really happy to have those improvements. We hope to maintain, but our desired goal was 5%, but we haven't gotten there. But if you look from the baseline of 2021 to where we're at 22, and then overall, we are back at baseline right now currently. So we started at 17.5 in 2021, and we're at 17.5 currently as of December. So, which is good because we were going up. As you can tell, we were at 30.2% and then 24. In our attendance rate, we were started again at baseline 94, and we are currently at 94 again. So we had dropped a little bit overall. And then you can look at our groups, how on all the different identified groups, how we have done. And so we're really happy with this. Of course, we wanted to reach our 97% or 100%, but we're definitely making growth in the area of attendance. In terms of pupil suspension, again, we started out with our baseline at 0.1% overall. Then we went up, and then we're on the trend of going down again. So you can see that right currently, as of December, we were at 1.4%. And so again, we don't have any pupil expulsions. And then on our panorama survey, and this is just the fall data, we take the next one that's coming up in March. Again, we've seen a lot of growth in our students and have their sense of belonging at 66%, our climate at 64, our engagement at 54, our safety at 60, and our student teacher ratio at 75. So we've definitely seen some growth in all of these areas, as well as on the middle school. So these, again, are areas of the need we will hopefully continue to maintain or, have a little bit more favorable results in the spring. So in terms, I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Perez, who will then go over our school attendance and suspension data.
Well, thank you. As we all know, school attendance is very important, that all students in grades who are age of 6 years old through 18 must be at school every day. So if you go to the next slide, this slide shows the attendance rate for the end of the school year in 2022-23 and the mid-year report that is up until December 2023. So we can see in all of our subgroups improvement, minimal increase on attendance rate. We would like to see this increase by the end of the school year if we continue with the efforts that we're putting into place to communicate with the families about attendance. Regarding chronic absenteeism, we see a decline. That's what we want to see every year. For the past 3 years, we see that in our district. This mid-year report see that there's an improvement in the area of chronic absenteeism for all the subgroups, because we want to, reduce the, the students who are out of school. So what the schools and the district has been doing to support our students in being at school every day, and is that with this year, we partner with an organization called School Status. Before it was called or formerly known as A2A, Attention to Attendance. So what we do is to send out notification letters letting the families know that our students, the number of absences that the students have at this time of the year. And then we ask the families if there are any assistance that they need to please reach out to the school sites. Another component is the work done by our MTSS DOSAs. We embarked in kind of like a task force to analyze at all the school site, what is it that we're doing to contact the families and to increase the engagement, in the student engagement, to bring the students back to school. And that has been a work that created a specific document with ideas and steps that the schools need to take in order to re-engage students into learning. Our office staff also supports those efforts by contacting the families on an ongoing basis. Something that came out of the task force was also what is called SESP, which is the School Engagement Support Plan, which is a side meeting that happens with the family and the students and the school side to determine what are the barriers for the students about not coming to school. Then there's a plan implemented, and then there's a second meeting to either recognize a success or that there's a revision that needs to happen for the plan. if we see that there's no success having the students back to school, the schools request a SAR meeting, which is the School Attendance Review Board here at the district office, when we bring agencies from the county to determine what is the issue. Is it a mental health issue? Is it a something else going on that the student, needs? And then we move forward with that piece. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the schools who are having these conversations at the school site, reviewing data and looking at, targeting what group of students they need to communicate with in order to bring them back to school. The next piece is the student suspension. So the student suspension is a temporary removal of a student from class for either adjustment or disciplinary reasons. Any educational code violation, and basically it's a very kind of like escalated kind of behavior when the students fight at a school site and cause a distraction at the school site level. So that's what, when the principals sometimes decide to suspend a student or provide an alternative to suspension. So these are this is the number of suspensions up until December compared to the end of the school year in 22-23. We are up to 96%, which is kind of like the 1.4 rate that we had last year. That's how we ended up at this point. I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. So 96%, I think I put this information wrong. Yes, 206 students at the end of the school year. We had a 3.20% of suspension rate. In comparison to December, at this point, we have only 92% students, which is 1.4. Our goal was to end the school year at 1%. And then you will see on the next slide what it looks like correctly, basically, with the correct information. So in 22-23, we end up all of our we ended up at a suspension rate of 3.20%. And now in December, the media report shows 1.40. For all of our subgroups, we can see that is a reduction on the number of students being suspended in the subgroup information. And we're hoping to get on this trend. Our goal as a district and for all of the schools is to keep students at school. So we also had a task force, we call it PBIS district team, where we look at the suspension violations table. And then we determine what are the alternatives to suspension that we can have for the student based on that violation, keeping in mind that we wanted to keep the students at school. And this is basically based on the recommendation from the state that we want to keep our students in school and to replace, the discipline or the behaviors with support. So when we look at this table, we offer different options as an alternative. And then we improve that table with, if this is the first incident, what can we do for the student? And then if it's a second incident with the same item, what can we do to support the student? And there was a lot of conversations going on among the team because we want to keep the school safe. but at the same time, we don't want the students on the streets. So, so that's why we call this document kind of a live document, because when the schools come up with a new alternative to suspension, that idea is added to that document so that the principals and site administration can look about other possibilities. The next slide. No, this is the, yeah. So we are currently having a team with and support from the Santa Clara County of Education with training for PBIS. 6 schools started the work last school year, and we are looking forward to add more schools in the upcoming school year. We were able to create what is called the Opportunity School Program through the LCSPP grant, which is the Local Community Sports School Success Program. This is a 3-year grant that allows us to hire a behavioral analyst and a mental health counselor. So this program has 2 components: a mental health component for services, and the actual placement of the student in an opportunity school classroom. So the services, basically the schools notify us through a referral process that there's a student that needs support either in mental health or behavior. So the team comes to the school site, do observations for 2 weeks in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in an instructor setting, and then meets with the teachers, meets with the parent, and meets with the administration, gathering feedback for 2 weeks. And then we have the recommendation meeting. And at that meeting, the team might recommend that the student continue receiving mental health counseling. And there's a teamwork, the school side, the family, and the student. In the area of behavior, if that's what is the recommendation, the behavioral analyst meets with the teacher and continues visiting the classroom. So provides strategies to the teacher in how to respond when the student is, behaving in a certain way that is not conducive to learning, and then provides feedback as well to the parents. This is what I observed. Have you tried this at home? And gives strategies for the parent as well. When the student that's for the services. And then for when the students are having behavior that we need to remove the student for safety, instead of sending the student home, we send the student to opportunity school, not in a punitive way, but with support services. What we do is that the same team and the opportunity school teacher brings the student to the school site, and the opportunity school teacher connects with the classroom teachers to gather all the classwork that the student needs to complete. Let's say that the student is failing classes because the student is not completing work. The opportunity school teacher supports the students in that area. There's an opportunity for the mental health counselor or the behavioral analyst to connect with the student as well while the student is in the program. The student usually stays there for a week or 2, and then we offer a reentry meeting at the school site. At that time, there's a follow-up. So the mental health counselor may follow up by having 6 additional sessions, counseling sessions with the student, or the behavioral analyst providing feedback to the teachers in how to, support the student. And then the same idea of communicating with the school site and the families. We continue monitoring the student data in the area of behaviors, and that concludes my piece.
Thank you, Antonio. And next we'll have Miss Ana Garay, who will present our counseling data.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. So I'm here to just kind of give a quick snapshot for the first half of the school year of counseling data. So we're talking August through the end of December. And in the counseling data, we have a lot of counseling services at this district. So kind of wanted to give you a breakdown of what's provided by who, right? So 51% of our counseling services are provided through contracted. So that comes through LCAP, Sequoia Healthcare District, and site funds. 46% are through our district counselors, and then 3% are services that we do not pay for, whether that's Star Vista, CMI, El Centro, services that have grants or outside funding to be at our schools. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Tier 1 interventions. We've really wanted to focus on Tier 1. Tier 1 is the most preventative form of counseling that we can provide at our school sites, reaching our kids early, making the counselors accessible. Kids know where they are, who they are, where they are, that's what they're there for. So this is kind of the breakdown of Tier 1 interventions for the first half of the school year. We are on track to surpass the amount of Tier 1 interventions we provided last year. So as you can see, the highest amount is for SEL. That kind of comes in a combination of two categories. One is structured curriculum. So we have a curriculum called Changing Perspectives provided by the county. Some schools also implement other curriculums such as Second Step, Kimochis. We do it for the culture. Each school kind of has what benefits them. And then we also have SEL lessons that are provided at the request of teachers. So that could be talking about boundaries. That could be emotion regulation. Let me come in and talk about mindfulness. So we do SEL, both structured curriculum and as requested. And then Lunch Bunch, kind of providing a space and opportunity for students to come talk to counselors, come talk to each other. Oftentimes it's a place for students that might not have a place to spend during lunch, and it gives them a place to build community. And then school clubs are similar. We have a stress less lunch club. So how do we talk about our stress and how do we manage our stress? This also includes things like GSA. Sometimes we have counselors helping to run GSA clubs. All right. Henry Ford and Garfield are our greatest implementers of Tier 1. That is something that those administrators and counselors have paired on to really emphasize and maximize at those sites. Across all of our sites, we've seen an increase. So we're really happy that sites that last year didn't have any or had minimal have really increased their Tier 1 interventions. In terms of check-ins, so the counselors did over 2,000 check-ins by the end of December. 58% of these were done by the district counselors. They're there every single day. They're usually more trusted and more recognized by students. So students tend to go up to them more often as opposed to partner contracted counselors that are there part-time and only some days. So over 1,000 students, which means that each student on average is maybe getting 2 check-ins. So, you know, there's some students that are more frequent flyers and some that maybe just come in once for an average of 27 minutes. And we're actively working on reducing that amount of time to decrease the amount of time out of the classroom. The biggest reasons for referral were peer relationships, emotion regulation, and anxiety, which really kind of match with what we've seen for the last 2 years as well. And this is kind of the grade level breakdown. So 8th graders are the highest, followed by 4th and then 5th. And then in terms of individual therapy, our district counselors have serviced 44% of individual therapy students. It's very common that our middle schools are high. It's interesting that this year 3rd grade is high. So we're going to see if that pattern continues through the rest of the school year, or maybe that was just something was happening with some of our 3rd graders at the beginning of the year, but just something interesting to notice that wasn't the case last year. So something we're going to keep tracking this year and see if as the year progresses, that maybe increases or plateaus, but something we're keeping an eye on. The greatest referrals, anxiety and behavior. Sometimes these behaviors are referred by teachers or parents or students. This year for individual therapy, our highest referrals are coming from parents, which is actually really exciting to see. Parents are referring more than any other category for individual therapy. So our parents know that we're there, they trust that we're there, and they trust us with their kids. And then in terms of group therapy, our district counselors are doing about 33% of these. And 3rd grade is the highest. It's really common that our lower grades are the most frequent users of group therapy. They're more likely to open up in a group, especially in like a social skills group, something along those lines, as opposed to middle schoolers are much less likely to be open and vulnerable in front of a group of their peers. And mostly for social skills. So again, with the younger grades. For crisis, we're cataloging crises a little bit differently than we did last year. Last year, we were only including kind of suicide risk assessments or threat assessments, but we realized that our counselors are being pulled in for a lot of things that take a lot of time that aren't just that. So the numbers for this year are going to look way higher, but that's because we're tracking it a little bit differently. Either way, our district counselors took over 86% of these crisis interventions. So the bulk of the crisis interventions were led by our district counselors, and it was a little over 160 hours just in the first 4 months of the school year. Most of that is time that they saved the administrators because they're the ones that would have had to deal with the big behaviors or the suicide risk assessments, waiting for police to show up, waiting for transportation to hospitals to show up. Since December, we have had a couple of kids hospitalized, and our counselors have been very involved. They've been fielding calls from hospitals. So we're making sure that we're, servicing those kids that need it the most. It might be interesting to know that extreme emotion dysregulation is the kind of the highest category for crisis intervention. This is mostly lower grades and mostly the first couple months of the school year. So these are kids that, we're spending 2 or 3 hours extremely dysregulated, can't get them in the classroom, throwing things in the classroom. And so in order for the teacher to be able to keep teaching, the counselor kind of pulls them aside, works with them, gets them back to baseline so that they're able to return to class at some point during the day. These are also the frequent flyers, right? So one of these kids might have had 5, 6 interactions with a counselor. And then as opposed to the non-suicidal self-harm, the suicidal ideation, those are usually, they get seen once and then that's it, which is actually really encouraging. And compared to past years, we're not having a lot of repeat students coming in with a suicidal ideation. So they're coming in with that ideation, they get connected to counseling, and then we don't have to do those assessments again. And I think that's it for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Ana Paula. And so one thing that we've also done that I didn't put on the report is just recently in our last PD, we actually had a Stanford Dr. Bott present to our K2 staff about self-care because we've focused a lot on the kids. We're now focusing on the teachers. So they came in and did a K2 and it looks like it was very well received. And right now we're working on looking at two presentations by them to work on, one on behavior so they can talk about the medical part and what can be done in the classroom with our teachers, as well as anxiety, because those are the 2 highest that came out of the information that we have currently. So we're working on trying to provide some resource support to our teachers as well to help support them in this area.
And I met with Dr. Bott yesterday. So we're going to get some of our counselors involved to help with the presentations for the teacher workshop series.
So we hope we can continue that next year as well. It's very important. Okay, so now we're going to go into goal number 2, which is really about our English learners. And so I know that we just did our ceremony of reclassification. And so as of now, we have about 167. And I know that Catherine has been working on looking at new numbers of reclassification as well. So we're hoping that number by the end of the year will go. So I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, who's going to present all of our English learner data.
All right, thank you. Good evening, board trustees and members of the cabinet, Dr. Baker, our superintendent, and my colleagues and guests out in the audience and online. So I'm going to first talk about our newcomer program, which is also one of the beneficiaries of through the LCAP funding, and talk about it because it's close to my heart. I really, it's my passion program for this year. The newcomer program, the mission of the program is designed around our mission, which is really to build relationships with our students, getting to really know our students to help them thrive academically and linguistically. And this year, we have 2 different pathways with a little graphic here for our newcomer students. And it all starts at registration. So through the registration process, when families come with their students, we are able to identify students who may benefit from the newcomer program and the newcomer services. And the newcomer program The two pathways are, one of them is the intensive program, which is housed at Garfield School. And the other is the pathway for our upper elementary students who then go to their neighborhood schools. So in the interview process, so each family is interviewed individually in a private, comfortable setting with the families, just to determine what would be the best program placement for their children. And so we're really looking at the upper elementary students, our TK through second grade students mainstream into their neighborhood school, or if they want to, a school of choice. But our upper elementary and middle school students, through the screening process, we work with the families to determine would a student qualify for the intensive program, which is at Garfield School. So the intensive program is intended for students who are new to the US schooling system, who are in grades 3 through 8, and who maybe have underschooling or gaps in their school experience, offered in Spanish. And so it's specifically for students who speak an indigenous language or students who are native Spanish speakers. And through the interview process, we guide families, and of course they have a choice, but we do make this intensive program an opportunity for students who may benefit from the program. The program is intensive in its supports because there are smaller class size. The teachers are bilingual, credentialed bilingual teachers. They offer an extended and intensive ELD program. So we're really trying to get students, it's like a boot camp almost, up to a year long. So students do not remain in a newcomer classroom for more, intensive program for more than a year. So it could be a few months for some kids, or it could be the full year. And students are given, our goal is to have them with basic skills so that they can eventually return to their neighborhood school. That is the goal of the intensive program, is that our students are at their neighborhood schools with peers, with closest where their families are, maybe their other siblings are at their neighborhood school. So that is the goal of the intensive program, that students return to their neighborhood school or the school that's closest to them, or school of choice if that's what the family wants to do. But as well as the intensive program, we also have our neighborhood schools. Not all neighborhood schools have a newcomer classroom classes with teachers, but the majority, and you can see on our map, on our graphic here, that most school sites have a credentialed teacher, and some with higher levels of newcomer students do have a bilingual instructional assistant as well. If students do go to Garfield School for intensive support, there is transportation provided for those students. And some students do have the opportunity to stay at Garfield as a school of choice once their time at the intensive program ends. So again, the goal is not to stay the whole time. The goal is always to go back to their neighborhood school. In their journey, whether they're at Garfield in the intensive program or they're in one of their neighborhood schools, with one of the newcomer teachers, we do have 10 newcomer teachers in total, in addition to 5 instructional assistants. And we have our newcomer TOSA, our teacher on special assignment, who happens to be here tonight, Vidal, who is an essential component, not just as an instructional coach supporting our teachers in the classroom, and with best practices in instruction. And he really gets to know our families, greets our newcomer students and their families when they started at a new school, gets to know the kids at the school sites, to build those relationships, because when it is time to move back to their neighborhood school, there is a familiar face, and then there's a pathway and helping them on that journey. So I think next slide. So a little bit of data. So newcomer students, I'm going to show you a couple different pieces of data. This first piece of data is for just a little bit of comparison of recent arrivals. So recent arrivals are students who are here with us in Redwood City, who are new to the US school system, 12 months or less. So just comparing the numbers by grade level, and then you could see just month to month. There is no specific pattern, you can see. We welcome our new international students all year, every week, all throughout the year. And in February, it's really, we've had about 10 more students in the last couple of weeks that aren't even represented on this chart. So we have quite a few more new students even that have just joined us. And I don't know why February, I don't know what's happening in February, but definitely have had a number of students joining us just this week. So you can see as of February 16th, 130 just through February compared to last year at 98. So those are recent arrival students who are in the US school system less than a year, so 12 months or less. And then newcomer data. So newcomer students or new international students are new students who are new to the US school system for 3 years or less. So we looking at all of our newcomer students, not just the recent arrivals, but students who are with us for the last few years. And so you could see just the total by school site. And these students continue to receive in grades 3 through 8, receive support at their school site. So that is the support is dependent upon their level of proficiency in English. And they'll be with a newcomer teacher or if appropriate, an English language development teacher, depending upon their English proficiency. You see where our staffing is across the district for either our instructional assistants or our teaching staff. So reclassification, and Ana Herrera just touched a little bit on reclassification, and all of us celebrated just recently. They got to see our students. So just looking at our data and where we are this year compared to last year. And I'd also just mentioned that there are more students we're looking at, and one of our goals is to increase the number of students who are dually identified, students who are both English learners and students with disabilities. And increasing the number of students with disabilities who are eligible to reclassify as fluent English proficient. So we have 48 more who we're really looking at closely. We really believe that they are going to make it in this next March iReady assessment to reclassify. So we do reclassify students all year long. It's not just, even though we celebrate and have the ceremony once a year, we do it all year long. But beyond just the 48, so we are looking at other students, and teachers are having some individual conferences. I know staff development was out, Sarah Cullum was out and having some individual conferences with kids, kind of a motivational speech about that they're so close, and doing a lot of LPAC practice and just helping them to be ready to demonstrate their English proficiency, that we don't want how to take a test to be a barrier to reclassify. Especially if the students are demonstrating that they have the skill set to be reclassified as fluent English proficient. So hoping to see those numbers increase, especially with our dually identified students. So on the opposite end of the reclassification are our students who we do need to monitor them most closely, which is our long-term English learners, our LTEL students. And these are just breaking down our LTEL, our students who are in our United States schooling system, 6 years or more, who are identified as English learners, so have not yet met the criteria to reclassify as English fluent proficient. And so we could see the breakdown of the numbers by grade level, as well as their LPAC scores, where they're scoring on their LPAC. And again, looking at our dually identified students, and we can see a higher representative number of dually identified students who have not yet reclassified. And that is definitely something that we are working with our special education department and looking at resources for the teachers who are working with our dually identified students, as well as professional development. Next one. Oh, there we go, sorry. And yeah, the next one, yeah, is so along with our LTEL, we're looking at the students who are on the brink of becoming LTEL, so the at-risk students, the ones who are at the brink of becoming LTEL next year if they do not qualify on this next LPAC. So we are entering the next assessment period. We've already opened the assessment window. And so there are, you can see that the big bulk of fourth grade, it's because if they're in the US school system 4 years or more and have not yet reclassified. It's not because of anything that the fourth grade's doing. It's just because that's the year at where you become an LTEL. And so you could see that there are a number of students who are at risk. And so this data has been shared with site administrators. This data has been shared with ELD teachers who have the potential to have the biggest impact in terms of testing on the days of testing, as well as by site.
And so just to add to that, I think, Catherine, this is also the ones that are not moving very much, right?
They are
Just
not
to
moving, yeah,
clarify.
so that, yes, they are not, it doesn't mean that they can't move, but that they are on a trajectory to become the long-term English learners. So what's next for how are we addressing the long-term English learners and those students who are at risk? So district-wide, so this year, I think you may have heard already about Language Power, the new supplemental ELD designated curriculum for kindergarten through 8th grade. So we started that this year and have had some training through district-wide, as well as some very targeted trainings with our ELD teachers across the district. That what we are seeing with Language Power, while it is new, it's so far well received, and that's from our ELD teachers and some of the students giving anecdotal feedback that it's a much more highly engaging curriculum, so students are more engaged in the curriculum and are more receptive to a curriculum. So designated ELDs is specific time in the day when students are grouped based on their LPAC scores. And so that's in designated ELD. We've also been doing some professional development in integrated ELD. Integrated ELD is during the class time, which could be any content, and teachers are specifically using strategies to ensure that our English learners are able to access content. So in integrated ELD and designated ELD, we've been doing some specific professional development, and we've also and we've had some focus on our middle school, both designated and integrated ELD. We have next steps as well, of what we're doing now and what we're looking forward to next year, more professional development. And in fact, that's something we're talking about next week in our master plan is creating our plan for both designated and integrated ELD. And focusing on our data warehouse, both with site administrators and teaching staff. Elevation is our data warehouse that targets our information for English learners. So we have different ways of storing data. We have spreadsheets, we have EduClimber, we have PowerSchool, but Elevation is specifically for English learners because it warehouses all of the information for English learner monitoring, RFEP monitoring. It gives us historical data on our students, specifically for English learner students and English learner data. So going more in depth for some staff, or for some staff being more comfortable using this tool so that they can best target either individuals or groups, or when they're creating their middle school classes or courses, they have the data that is accessible, and planning with an eye on how to set your master schedule around how are we going to best serve English learners is one of our major subgroups. All right.
Thank you,
All right.
Catherine. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Go 3. And so Go 3 again is our English language arts and math and how we're doing. So one of the things that we've been implementing, since we've been very fortunate, is reading intervention, CAP tutoring, and district tutoring are through the focal points for tonight. For our reading intervention, we have been very fortunate. We have some schools, every school has a reading specialist, but then we have some sites who also have some math specialists as well. So these are just an information as to where our reading interventors have some extra support. So as you can tell, Adelante has an extra person. TAF has extra people as well, which are funded by site as well as RCEF. Henry Ford had reading and some math, and Clifford also has some extra personnel for math and reading. So that's beyond the regular, everyone having the intervention. So that's just, that's some of the data will show that. Up to date, these are the students at school sites that we have intervention that's been happening in terms of reading. So we have about 423 students. It's a lot of kids that we have. One of the things that we're working on for the end of the year report is really trying to capture our data for how we're doing in our current curriculum. So up to date, I've asked our principals to share how many students had exited from the beginning of the year, how they're doing on the new assessments, especially in the primary level. So I had 4 schools who shared that data with me. Of the 4 schools, we have 129 students who have made some progress on our new assessment of the BPST, which is our K-5 assessment of phonics. We had 23 students so far who had made no progress. We had 11 who had declined, and we have 52 who have actually exited reading intervention. And so again, that is not all the school sites on here. Those are just the 4 sites that actually shared their information. So I'm hoping to be able to have more of that information at the end of the year report so that we can see how our new assessments are doing and how our students are tracking our students to understand where we need to move on for next year. So these are the amount of students of what grade levels are being impacted in through intervention. As you can tell, we have many in our 1st and 2nd grade, which is exactly where we need to have the investment. And just to add on that TK student here, this is the opposite of intervention. This is a student who's doing very well in TK and needs intervention to continue learning. So that was just a different take on one student, and that, principals make these decisions. But you can tell that we have 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We still have supports with our students. It's probably not enough, but I've been able to, because our 2nd through 5th graders do take the iReady, I was able to actually track some of those scores and information. In our intervention, just to provide, we have about 206 of those 400 students who are in intervention right now. Again, most of them being 1st and 2nd grade, so 49% of them. For our students who are English learners and socially economically disadvantaged, we have about 43% of our students, again, the majority being in 1st and 2nd grade, who need a lot of support. And then these are the information on iReady that I was able to gather for our 2nd through 5th graders who are actually taking our reading iReady test. And so you can see that we have 76 students who did not make any growth on iReady, but we did have 62 students who made some growth on iReady in those grade levels. So you can see how it's broken out, those students that are 3 or more grade levels below, 2 or more, 1 grade, or who was on early on grade level. So you can see that, again, many of the students that are being worked with in intervention are probably 3 or 4 more years below. So in that category, so they have a lot to grow in order to get to grade level. But there is traction moving forward on some of these students. So we're hoping that if these students continue in the reading intervention, that we will see some more growth at the end of the year on our next assessment, which is actually currently taking place right now. And then for math intervention, we do have Henry Ford and Clifford, who have 61 students who are in math intervention as well. They've been very fortunate to have a dedicated half-time teacher to help support in those math areas. And so through the math intervention, they have the majority of their students, as you can tell, this is a little different. They have a lot of students in 3rd grade and 4th grade that are in math intervention at those grade levels versus where we see in reading, it's more 1st and 2nd grade. So just a little difference about where they're trying to support their students in the area of math, which I think is very important. It's, we would love to have a math intervention. I know when I was at Taft, I wanted a math intervention teacher too, because it does definitely help support our students. Of those students that they are addressing, there's 56% of them are English learners and socially economically disadvantaged. So a huge number of students enough students that are getting supported at their sites. Now we're going to go into our district tutoring. So we also have teachers who are tutoring their own students. It's a smaller number, but you will see that where they're at. And so we have we have Hoover, who has 38 students who are in tutoring currently. And so you can see the numbers as they go. Again, these are teachers working after school with their own students. So we have 110 kids in total in the district tutoring program. So you can see them by grade level. So again, you can see that the majority of our students, well, not the majority, second grade is a majority, but then there's pretty much first, fourth, and fifth grade. So again, teachers are taking on this extra work. Of those students that are being tutored, 90 students are socially economically disadvantaged. So 82% of our students are our identified group, and the majority being second graders. And then 71 students are also English learners and socially economically disadvantaged. So again, second grade being the highest, and then fourth grade. And then with our students with disabilities, we also have 6 kids who are being tutored by our teachers as well. So it's great that they're also getting the supports. Now we're going to go into college advisory prep. So our college advisory prep TAP tutoring does take place at our identified schools. This is not something that we do at all schools, but we do provide services for our target schools. So in CAP tutoring, we also have a certain number that are in math and a certain number in ELA. The majority have been in math. It's one of the areas that people have targeted. So you can see we have 233 students that are doing math, and then 28 they're doing English language arts. So a lot of them are done, everyone should be done after school. So this is in the after school programs at the sites. Okay, so you can see that for ELA, we have the majority of fourth graders, but in math, it's pretty almost an even number when you look across the grade levels. For our students, we have 179 of those students who are identified English learners and socially economically disadvantaged, and these are the numbers at each of the school sites. Garfield does have an extra group of students who are also in CAP through their Measure U. I did not add them to this one, but there is, just because it was a little separate in terms of the budget. We have in math, we have 257 of the students. You can see where the targets are and what schools. Kennedy is new to us this year. They did not have CAP last year. And so they're targeting their students currently before testing. Some of the tutoring continues all the way till May. Some of it ends depending on whatever the principal has decided to support and what grade levels. But you can see across the board, Garfield, Taft, and Kennedy have the highest numbers there. In tutoring, we see the following numbers of students who have moved up 2 levels just with the CAP support across the grade levels. Still a lot of work to do that we have, but we are seeing some movement and traction. We did see this last year as well at each of the individual school sites when we had CAP at the mid-year. Again, we're doing another report at the end, hoping to see more growth. Okay, so that's all I have. Any questions? It's a lot of information. Any questions for myself or any of the team members here?
Wow, that was a lot. Awesome. Data. Loving to see the overall progress from last year on a whole bunch of different axes. So like, that's terrific to see. I did appreciate the humility in stepping back a couple of years and saying, well, it's progress, but it got us back to baseline, and our targets are still yet quite a bit further from where we're at. So more progress yet to go. I like to look at the slope. The slope looks like it's pointing in the correct direction, which is good. So I want to cheerlead the awesome progress from last year to where we are now. And I want to continue to cheerlead that next year we'll see similar deltas as well. Some of the charts that were presented, going back a few presentations, because this was quite a bit that we all took in one big swallow. Looked like it was kind of comparing apples with oranges a little bit to go and take a look at the December 31st numbers, sort of half year versus full year. Just next time, what would be really helpful is to, given that we're looking partway through the year, when we were partway through the year at that point last year, where were we? And that'll just help us digest. So data on, for instance, like suspensions, the numbers are down, but the numbers are also down because we're only partway through the school year. And so getting to see like where were suspensions at as of December 31st, the prior year versus December 31st this year will help us figure like, are we making forward progress on this or not versus just sort of squinting and trying to guesstimate where those bars are. Okay, great. In terms of mental health, the therapy by grade level curve was quite surprising. That was not a shape I would have guessed. And that's the point at which I'd probably raise my hand and go ask some other districts or the county or the state, like if they're seeing similar trends, if this is something that is unusual and particular to the interesting trends and demographics of what's happening in Redwood City, or if this is something more broadly that we're seeing. Oh, boy.
It'd be really
I
interesting.
can try to address that.
On Apollo, also how many other school districts have the mental health clinicians at each school site like we do?
So I'm actually having a meeting with the mental health lead coordinators for Sequoia and for San Mateo next Friday.
Sweet.
So the three of us are going to get together and kind of talk about best practices and stuff. But we are further along in our process of having a mental health program than they are. So they're further along in collecting data. They're still kind of figuring out what that's going to look like. In terms of the grade level curve, it was a couple schools. Some schools, I think it was a little more linear. Some schools, it was a little more all over the place. So for the schools that were maybe a little more all over the place, that's something that I flagged with them individually, with both the counselors and the administrators. Sometimes it just happens that sometimes there's one grade level, right? Let's say last year it was second grade. Well, now it's third grade. And so sometimes there's just something going on in that grade level that we might need to pay more attention to. So that's something that we flagged at the mid-year point with those specific schools. Yeah.
Okay.
So nothing super obvious
Yeah.
at this moment. It was really kind of site specific.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, just things that make me scratch my head like, oh, that's fascinating. I don't know that I would necessarily expect that, say, fifth graders would have fewer mental health referrals than third graders. Middle school is just awful. So yeah. Sorry. Family changes were obviously a big source of referrals. I'm just wondering if there's things that we could do as a district to get ahead of that when we get in the school back office, maybe indications that there's some significant family changes that are happening. If we can sort of flag that proactively. Are we already doing stuff like that?
Yes and no. Sometimes it comes from the office. Sometimes it comes from the parents reaching out themselves, being like, I just had a baby, right? And my second grader's having a really hard time, or dad and I are separating. So we usually get that information from the parents, usually information that they don't feel comfortable sharing with the front office, right? They feel comfortable with the counselor because they know it's going to be kept confidential. So we usually hear that information when parents are the ones reaching out asking for the support. But usually if a front office is made aware of something, then they loop in the counselor.
Yeah.
Similar, Catherine's team, right? We have a lot of things that are going on in the families of those students, in addition to cultural and immigration trauma. So her team will let us know as well.
That makes sense. I'm wondering if to supplement that, there are signals that we can get that like, hey, the two guardians used to share the same address and now the two guardians do not share an address. Like, it sounds like maybe we're already looking into.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're not catching 100% of the students,
Okay.
but the ones that we are aware of, we're catching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll just to piggyback on that. I think a lot of teachers sometimes hear things at firsthand because kids share it when they come in
Kids
the
talk.
community circle. So sometimes those are flags too, and those are right away flagged and put into the system.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. It seemed like Adelante had a much lower tier 1 intervention rate. And then conversely, like Henry Ford had a really high intervention rate. And it's just, as a board member, it makes me curious about when I see schools interacting with the system in very different ways. And I was just wondering if there's any narrative around that.
There is. So the issue with Adelante was how they were tracking their tier 1 data, and they were not tracking everything they were doing. So we're fixing that, and they're going back in and back entering data for the first half of the year. Adelante Selby has actually implemented peacemakers. So what the counselor did is she took volunteers from 4th and 5th grade to become peacemakers. So she spent several weeks training them. They go around with lanyards. Basically, they go around and they spot their peers who might be having trouble interacting with each other. And they kind of act as like a little coach mediator within themselves. And so the counselor, Vicky, she's out there every recess and every lunch, They've got walkie-talkies so they can like check in with each other. It's actually really cool to
love it.
see. We want the
Yeah,
kids to be
yeah.
able to kind of like help
Yeah.
each other out and not rely on an adult to kind of step in and mediate. So we're just making sure we're tracking that where we weren't tracking it for the first half of the year.
That sort of peer engagement is fantastic and will be unsurprising. It's like love language for me. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome to
And
hear.
we're on track to actually implement that at Orion as well. They're wrapping up their student training.
That's awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate all those answers. Thank you so much. On to newcomer. Questions on that program. Is it, could it be the case that a kid starts off, K to 2, they just are in their neighborhood school, and then the newcomer programs start with a focus on third grade. Are there cases where a student will start in second grade and then third grade they'll transfer to a newcomer school? Is that a transition that happens?
So at the beginning of the year, we did start the intensive newcomer program
Right.
at Garfield, starting in second grade. So we did have up until the holiday, winter break, an intensive second grade. They're all combination classes, so a combination second, third grade.
Mhm.
So all students in the second grade exited to neighborhood schools.
Mhm.
And so it was part of our program model, but moving the second half of the year, it's a third grade on up. There are some kids in their neighborhood schools, and depending upon the student need, the teachers will oftentimes communicate with either their site administrator or with our TOSA, and the newcomer teacher or instructional assistant can pull in and support a second grader.
Cool. What's our thought in terms of like how this program is working? Do we feel like we've got the happy tingles about it and we want to continue in the structure, that we want to double down and like have a larger percentage of folks go into these newcomer programs and have them last longer? Or do we want to just try to fully track them in directly into the neighborhood school and take the findings from the newcomer program and integrate them into the classrooms in the neighborhood school?
That's funny that we talk about that all the time. So there are pros and cons to having an intensive program. And the pros are, it does provide a very safe space for students who are new to US schooling system, but maybe even new to school or a formalized education altogether. And so that safe environment with a small group of kids and a small and a teacher that you're really connected to, that is definitely a pro. The cons, though, and are especially for middle school students and upper elementary, it is not a program that's intended to last a long period of time. It's really, the goal is to transition to your homeschool, and that transition yet again after somebody who has already gone through a major life transition of immigrating to a new country and a whole new school system, and so having to do that, whether it's mid-year, a few months, 2/3 through the year, that's really hard on students, and I think adults are. And so having children or adolescents transfer after peer relationships have been established is hard, and that negative side, I think, outweighs the pro. And so we're really looking at next year a different model, and students all at their home schools, and really focusing on middle school, where the most area of support is with newcomer staffing.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't see that would have been neat to see would be like the distribution of incoming countries, because I think for a lot of people, the mental model is like it's close to 100% Mexico, and I think that the reality is more nuanced and complicated than that. So it'd be interesting to see what is that now. Is that changing in terms of the mix that we're seeing? And again, the mental model is probably 100% Spanish speaking. The reality is probably more nuanced than that. What are we seeing, and how do we see that changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So I only have anecdotal without having hard numbers, but I was in Roosevelt's newcomer class with grades 3, 4 with our teacher, Ana Tavares, and she was doing greetings. How do we greet each other? How do you greet each other in your home country? All of the students' primary language was Spanish. At the small group of 5, nobody was from the same country. So we had Venezuela, Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico. I think one was actually Portuguese. I think that one was from Brazil. So it was just interesting to see that it was a mix of students. And so we've definitely seen more students compared to last year, or at the beginning of the first half of the year, because this is my first year, from Colombia and Venezuela. this second half of the year. We do have a number of students also from Central America, so we do have a lot of students from El Salvador and Guatemala.
Awesome. These kind of
Yeah.
details are really helpful for us. Like we need to serve these children. We want to understand these children who we are needing
Yeah.
to accommodate in our district. So really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of gifted newcomers, do we offer testing? Because I noticed that like North Star was not even listed in the less than 3 years here newcomer graph.
Yeah, so families would need to apply within that application window.
Right.
And it's not that they can't, but I don't believe it's offered in any other language other than English.
It's,
No, you
No,
could, it could be
it's
Oh, they-
in
visual.
Spanish.
Okay, or in Spanish. So
visual. It's a visual test, so
Is
there's
it
no
a visual
language
test? Okay.
needed.
Yeah.
But I will say that North Star does have some students that were newcomers maybe 2 years ago that have tested in and that are fairly doing well in English.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that as people come to our country, we can identify gifted students and give them options that
Yeah.
may be appropriate for
Yeah.
them. So, okay, cool. Awesome. Great to hear about the new curriculum that we've, been rolling out, and so happy to hear that like it seems to be resonating, that language power is working out well. I would love to understand a little bit more about what's going on with our long-term English learners, like to actually like hear from them, like what's going on. I heard a lot of different programs that we're rolling out for our long-term English learners, and it's great that we have these actions that we're taking and these interventions that we're applying. But like I would love a sense of like what's working, what's not working, and how the students themselves feel about how it's been to go through the program, to hear from some of these students. And I feel like that's where like I'm not particularly grounded in this problem, is like hearing from the long-term English learners themselves.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I was just in a class today at Hoover. We were, yeah, I can't say all the reasons why. I mean, I know some of the reasons. I mean, I could just presume to know after working in this district for many years. And I know some of the challenges. I know some of the challenges during COVID was really impactful in a lot of our kids being able to access curriculum. But that was everybody. But especially it really impacted our English learners tremendously. But I don't know all the reasons why. I think engagement in school, engagement with the curriculum, feeling connected to their school, ensuring high quality instruction by teachers that they have relationships with. There's lots of components to year after year building upon what you know. So making sure that the curriculum is connected, making those connections. It's lots of things will impact a learner, but specifically an English learner's ability to access rigorous curriculum.
But I would like to add, on one of the graphs, we do look at the students that are at level 3.
Yeah.
Because they have to get a level 4.
Yeah.
So if you look at that graph, we do have a number of students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that are level 3s that could easily, and so
Yes.
I think one of the things that's just focusing in on those students with principals need to focus as well as teachers, and talking to them to really understand, like, this is the year you can exit.
Yeah.
Right? So then that whole group would be, because we do have a number of level 3s in the 6th, 7th, and 8th
yeah.
grade that can easily be bumped into a level 4. It's just a matter of the work, but the teachers have to do with the students to make them have a goal, create those systems in place to really understand the why and how important it is.
Can we bonus teachers who do a good job at like bumping their level 3s to level 4s?
Yeah, something we're doing this year that is a lot of site staff. So our MTSS TOSAs, our reading specialists are helping a little bit during each week to test some of our students on the LPAC this year. And knowing students and having a relationship with students and knowing a little bit more about instruction, hopefully that will have an impact on some of our students taking the LPAC exam, who may, as opposed to taking it with a stranger, don't know at all. That's not happening for everybody. We do have our district testers, but a lot of sites have just said, we want to do our grades 3 through 8. Like, we want to really focus on testing our grades 3 through 8. so that they can have a greater impact on the outcomes.
Awesome. Thanks. I could go on. This is a topic I care a lot about, but I want to yield the floor to my colleagues here. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Sure, I'll go next. Thank you for the presentation or the information. Since you're up there, I'll ask, well, actually, I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment. And I do want to say that I do appreciate the relationships that are built to support all of our newcomers. Being, a long, I don't know what you call me, a long time ago, a newcomer. Again, I know what it feels like. So I totally understand. And then when you want to talk to them, it's quite interesting. I mean, again, I was in a classroom with a whole bunch of people that were literally newcomers like that year. You tend to feel very comfortable. And then they told me I was ready for the mainstream in 1 year. Mind you, my accent was still super heavy. And I think I was just so self-conscious. And I'm like, I'm not ready. And they're like, yes, you are. So I think it's just the sense of security and feeling safe that makes you feel comfortable and you don't want to leave. So talking about the intensive program, again, they're coming to a new country, learning a new language with a teacher, and then you want to send them with another teacher. And perhaps if they're in middle school now, they're going to another school. That's like trauma times 10. So it's really hard. And again, kudos to the teachers and the teachers' aides that are always there, because yes, all the other teachers work hard, but they are working extra hard to support those kids. So again, kudos to all of those teachers and teachers' aides in the classroom, the TOSAs in the classroom. So just everyone that's involved. So I really don't have any more questions other than it was just a comment regarding newcomers. And then my other question with the information that was provided was if maybe Mr. Perez can clarify, when we talked about opportunity schools and suspensions, you mentioned that students are there for, I believe you said a week. So I'm wondering, is that week, is it a facility? Are they there day and night, or are they able to spend, like, can you just, I guess, explain that?
And yes, so it depends on when we remove the student for safety reasons and needs to be removed, not removed, but suspended for 5 days or for 3 days. Instead of sending the student home, we meet with the family, and then we talk about, I review the student profile. The student is not doing well academically. It seems that the student is having a hard time at the school site. So we have a meeting with the family and the school site, and the opportunity school team comes. And then we talk about, the student can come to the program. The program is based at Taft Elementary School in one of the classrooms. And then we bring the student to school. At that meeting, we talk about, is it a week or 2 that will, support the student? So it's kind of like a support plan for the student. We set goals for academics and then goals about a reflection about the incident that happened that the school needed to remove the student from the school site. And then ongoing communication with the school site. And so far, the student that had joined the program had been there for 2 weeks. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes. And
Okay.
then are the teachers that are in that program, are there our teachers or are there?
Yes, there's an artist, one teacher that we hired, the opportunity school teacher who has background in, mental health support. So it's kind of like an asset to have this particular teacher. And then the mental health counselor is also in that classroom, and behavioral analyst is also in that classroom. They may be out throughout the day because they're supporting other students at the different school sites. But most of the time they're there to support if needed.
And then going to the mental health piece, again, is just a comment. Thank you so much, Ana Paula and your team. And again, all the teachers that are there day, in and out with the students. Because again, it's so sad to come to the realization that we're not just teaching academics, we're actually needing to kind of retrain those kids to, be mentally stable before they can continue with their studies. And, looking at some of the graphs, when like second graders are a really high number of whether they're referred by their parents or their teachers, there's definitely something going on, but I do, again, kudos to all of you too for handling that, because that's an extra load. So thank you so much. And
Thank
that's
you.
all my comments.
I'm gonna build on your question about the opportunity schools. It's actually more just a clarification for me. So if a student first of all, I love the direction that everything's been going for the last decade or more around saying that, rather than be punitive, we should be offering supports for students. The trend is amazing. But so if a student is actually placed into the opportunity school, is that considered a suspension, or is that 1.7% other students that didn't get into the opportunity school?
Well, the thing is that sometimes the school suspend the students for one day or, for, whatever the incident, whatever violation based on the educational code. For this one, it's more about removing the student for safety reasons. Like, let me give you an example. A student, I don't know, I think I can say it. The student, let's say, targeted a particular student and threatened the student, and a threat assessment was, completed, and the victim feels unsafe because that student is present there. So that's an immediate, response. When we do the threat assessment, the student feels that I don't want, I feel uncomfortable with the other student being present. We have this conversation with the student and the family. And for that reason, we come to this conclusion, we cannot have the student now return to the school site immediately, but we have this program. And that's when we remove the student to opportunity school.
I see. So they may have actually been suspended out of school, and then to come back, they go through the opportunity school.
That is accurate.
Yeah, I was trying to understand when we would choose to send somebody out of school entirely as opposed to giving them an alternative opportunity. But I think I follow it now.
So this is that.
That is the
alternative.
alternative. It sounds like we're still also suspending students out of school.
Yeah, but the students who attend the opportunity school program are not suspended.
So instead of
Right.
being
They're
suspended
marked
for like
present.
2 weeks, maybe you're suspended for 1 day from the school, but
Okay.
the remainder of the time is spent at the
Okay.
opportunity school where there is no suspension. But that's an agreement. There's a plan with the student, plan with the parent, and then of course with the opportunity staff member, the teacher that's there also, of what's going to take place. And then to go back to the school, there is a re-entry plan where the parents come with a student, meet with the principal, Senor Perez, and others of this is how things are going to work now while you're here. If if this child was targeting another child, there's a specific plan of what you're going to do. If you feel that you need to do something to someone, there's someone else that you go to, or there's something else that you do before went over to talk to somebody.
Right.
So all of that takes place as part of a learning experience during this time you're at the opportunity school, so you can seek out others that can support you in that hour of when you're going to have some type of a disciplinary issue to flare up.
And something that I did not share is that we are also, it's not part of the program, but we are just adjusting this. It's for the students with mental health, school refusal. So we started meeting so far with one family about the opportunity to come to the opportunity school program because due to anxiety and all that, the student is not able to come to school. So we developed this plan. We met with the student. We have the student actually coming to the program, meet with the teacher, And it's been very challenging, but so we are moving on that direction as well, bringing and re-engaging students who have a school refusal, and then slowly bring the student back to their home school. That's another idea that
Yeah.
we are putting into place.
Great. That sounds great. Again, you know, finding ways to support the students as opposed to just saying, go.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Is a wonderful thing to be doing. On the other thing I wanted to just build on was David's comments about the student voice from our long-term English learners and sort of the experience that they were, because it kind of reminded me of that Stanford study that had come out in 2019 or
Right.
2020, where it's it's just really a difficult read because they would interview kids in high school that were fluent in English. The interviews were just totally in English, and yet they were not reclassified. They were still long-term English learners, and how that was impacting their education and their opportunities there. And many of their answers were just like, yeah, it's just another test. We didn't really understand it. And I understand that the high school district has become much better at addressing and supporting those students as a result of that study that's there, but it's still, it's still an important thing. So I really do appreciate the extra attention that's being placed on the ones that are, at level 3 and, making sure that everybody's kind of aligned to try and put that stuff together. I think it's that's a good push. I'm also looking forward to seeing, it's going to take a while, right? As we bring in language power, as we're building out the integrated language development units and all of that, it's going to take a while to see the impact of that. So it'll be interesting to see that come along. On the third goal, did the data look right? I mean, it looked like the reading specialists that, the specialists, the tutoring is really having an impact. Now, obviously we didn't see every student that's in those programs make progress in there, but it seems like probably if the students that did make progress probably wouldn't have if they weren't in those programs. Is that kind of the right way yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah.
And so one of the things I've also in the data that we're collecting, we're also noticing, one of the things I'm noticing on some schools are actually tracking how attendance is affecting some of these students in reading intervention. And so one of the things that I noticed on one of the school report was the students who had been absent more often were the ones least making, which we know, we know it's not something that's not said, but there are schools who are tracking how many times a student is actually whether it's 2 or 3 times a week, or whether it's weekly. Some schools are really tracking the attendance to see, is this the right placement? Because again, a student who's not in school is not receiving, but then they're taking the spot of someone else who probably could be there that's every day. So I know those are decisions that are being made, but I did notice there were some students on some of the information they shared that they are tracking attendance too.
Great. And then I know we're coming to the end of the 3-year section for the LCAP, and that a new one, is going to start being discussed about this. But these goals feel pretty durable, and it still feels like there's good progress to go after these 3 goals. How much are you expecting that they'll shape the future of the next version of the LCAP?
I don't think we're changing them too much. I think what we're going to try to do is be very focused about, for example, I think I was talking about like looking at percentages, like, okay, we want to make 3% growth per year. We want to make, ELs, what is our actual rate that we want to, looking at what we're seeing and just fine tuning the percentages of growth over time.
Yeah. Okay,
So
great.
we're not really changing, it's just being very focused on what's tangible.
Great.
What we've seen.
And I'm super proud that like one of our 3 goals is focused on emerging bilingual students and making sure that's there, it's at the top, and it really keeps it front and center for everyone that's sort of looking at what's important to the district.
I think one thing that Anna's been working on also that needs to be acknowledged is that working with the reading specialists and really looking at what they're doing and looking at the data. And that's one thing that we're doing right now with principals is looking at the data, which you'll be getting to another turn with them. Because what we see with some principals when they're really focused on the data and they're meeting with the teachers on a regular basis, you're seeing that the kids are moving.
Right.
And we've got to get in that habit again. We were quite laxed when COVID hit, but we got to get back into it. You look at these students and what it's the plan going to be, and then you have the intervention, assess, and you need to move them on. And if you have the intervention and they're not progressing, okay, what's wrong? What's happening?
Yeah.
So we're seeing that as we're meeting with each of the principals right now. And you'll get to see that information. We just need to get that template done for everybody to do the same thing. You look at the spreadsheets, I mean, they're doing a great job, but there's some spreadsheets that look a little better than others. And so we want to kind of combine a little bit of each and how they manipulate the differences on them, because you can see the growth with these kids. It's amazing.
So that's one of our goals right now, is really streamlining how we're capturing the data, especially because we have the new assessments in the primary level, and there's a lot of data. And so we're really trying to figure out what's the best streamline, so that next year, starting next year, we're going to have everybody doing a streamline document so that we can track it a little better and see where they start to where they end. And so that's what he's talking about, is that everyone has a different spreadsheet. So we're trying to capture the data, the same data, so we can actually analyze it a little better and provide that information to you guys about how we're actually doing from the start to the end. And we haven't done that this year because we've done it in a different way, but we haven't been able to capture the same data just because everyone is new to all the new curriculum and assessments. So we really want teachers to feel comfortable. And for example, in math, we've actually today we've been meeting with our grade level leaders, as well as we want to capture the math data. There is a math online assessment that they can do with the new curriculum, but because the teachers have been hesitant, again, they're learning the whole platform. So we've been asking them that we really want them to start using that data so we can start capturing where they're at in math and compare a year from now to a year later, because we haven't been able to do that. So we're asking them now to do that. So that's one of the messages going out on Monday to the principals, because we really want to see where we started to where we're going next year.
Yeah, great.
keep
That sounds like it'll be super helpful. Well, Anna, Antonio, Anna Paula, Catherine, thank you so much for presenting tonight. And I know you also recognize the principals and the reading intervention teachers for being able to pull all of this presentation in there. It was really helpful. It was really, I thought, super interesting to hear how the actions in the LCAP report get translated into the narrative that was presented here tonight and sort of added a lot more color to it. So I appreciate all the work that went into the presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Elisa, is there anything you'd like to add?
I wanted to say thank you very much. Anna, that was a great report. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Catherine, Ana Paula, Antonio, and then, of course, as Mike mentioned, all the folks who helped put the presentation together. Yeah, it's exciting. I think, David, you really talked about, some of the things we're seeing, and certainly I'm excited about all of that. I was thinking, Dr. Baker, as you were talking, and I know this is going on, but particularly for our long-term ELs, for those students who are, 2 and 3 levels below grade level, and particularly those that are like 4th grade and above, I hope that the teachers are really having conversations with the students and the families, sharing the data, really trying to get them excited about being committed to work with the teacher, to work with the school, to really make that growth. Because I think, as we were just saying, particularly when they get to 7th and 8th grade, the importance of them needing to make that growth in order to be successful in high school, right? So anyway, I know we've done the goal setting conferences and we're doing more of that, but I really hope that that data is being shared with them. So there's a commitment to working on it together, to help the student get to where they need to be. So I think my colleagues covered a lot of what I was going to say. I appreciate the focus on attendance and reducing the suspensions, because we know that kids need to be in school, and just everything else that was said. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I think in light of the time, I'm just going to say that thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate the presentation. It took a lot of work to put that together. So Anna and everyone and the people who aren't here who worked on it, just really appreciate that time, and excited to see the progress, especially on absenteeism. Want to keep seeing those numbers going down, and Yeah. Pass it on to Dr. Baker if you want to.
Just now you know how important it is for us to have that feasibility study. That's all I'm gonna say. We want to continue. We want to continue with what we're doing, and because it's working, you're seeing it happening, especially in the area when you're looking at the language arts, you're looking at our multilingual learners, you're looking at our mental health. It's moving the students along, and so that's why I think our community needs to really understand how important it is and the story that we need to tell, why we need this so much. So I'm glad that it's going in this direction. We have work to do. It's not that we don't. We recognize that. We recognize that. But without the resources, it's hard to do it. It's really difficult to do it. So I'm glad we're going to go forward and see how that develops. But when you have the resources and you use them correctly, you can start to see things move. So thank you, Anna. Thank you, group. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much. So we usually take a break at 9 o'clock. So I want to check in with my colleagues. How are we doing? Do we need a 5-minute break or do you want to power through? How's the rest of the staff? All right. We will power through.
Thanks.
Good night. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're on consent.
I'll move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 11.1, the 2024 CSBA Delegate Assembly nominations.
Yes, normally I'm going to turn this one over to Elisa. Can speak to this more than I can, I'm sure. And it's fine if she does that. She is quite knowledgeable. And there are only three candidates at this point in time.
Yeah, so there's 3 candidates for 3 positions, and I can speak highly to all 3 of them. They've all been serving just recently. They're all on the newer end of serving as delegates. So I hope that they will get reelected, and I imagine they will because it's 3 out of 3. So I would encourage all of you to go ahead and vote them in. If you have any specific questions, let me know.
So are there questions? No. I guess it's an action item. So whether or not we want to nominate these 3.
There's 3 candidates for 3 slots, so it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of vigorous discussion to be had on this.
Make a motion.
Is there?
I'd like to move that we approve this.
I'll second, and I just want to say thank you to Chelsea, Sophia, and Pat for being the delegates.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Reports from board members and superintendent. Who would like to go first?
I can start. So since our last board meeting, I participated in Roosevelt Reading Fair and got to see all the boards that they put together. That was a lot of fun. I partnered on a team with the district librarian, so that was kind of a fun team to work with. I saw Clifford's Mary Poppins Jr., which was an adorable musical, really, really well performed, outstanding. We've got a lot of talent in the district, so it's always fun to see the musicals. I had pancakes from the Taft Pancake Breakfast. Thank you to David for reminding us about it when he came and did the presentation there. So that was fun. It was a hopping event in the morning. I brought my daughter. We had to grab him to go, but it seemed like there were a lot of people go. And then of course, I think we've mentioned it before already. All of us attended the reclassification ceremony that was at Hoover. Catherine left already, but Anna, it was a great ceremony that got put together. I want to thank Laura, our DLAC president for coming and speaking for all the students, and really thanks to Hoover for hosting.
The only reclassification as well, I did go to the pancake. I did go towards the end, but there were still a lot of people, so that was really nice. I attended on Monday. Alyssa and I were in the superintendent's advisory committee, and Catherine spoke about the newcomer center, and you guys heard all the information. And then the other subject that we talked about was Petrinia Red, talked about the health and wellness. And so again, she gave us a rundown of all the hearing screening, the dental screenings that they're doing. I mean, they're doing like 3,000 students hearing and like almost 700 for dental. And I forget, there's one, oh, it was the dental screening, they're even reaching Connect Charter School as well. And then for, what is it? Oh, and then they also have vision screening. So that's, you know, free vision screening for, is it pre-K and kinder, I believe. So it's really nice, again, to hear all that information. And again, I did mention kudos to all those people, because, you know, they do so much behind the scenes that we don't really see. So anyway, I believe that's all that I have to report.
The pancakes were fluffy and delicious at Taft. I felt warmly welcomed by David, so thank you, David. Great name. The reclassification ceremony was a lot of fun. So it's wonderful to see when we do a good job of that. Earlier today, I went over and spent some time at Connect Community Charter School, going and jamming with their staff about the potential to use AI tutoring. And sort of gave them a bit of a recap on what the state of the art is there. They have a lot of interest. They'd actually like to partner with the district on looking at Khan Academy's AI offering. So thought that was pretty cool. And then I've also engaged some with the San Mateo County Dental Society about trying to get recommendations for best practices in dental care to be used by a school district. So taking a look at like what is known to work or not, and any recommendations they might have for our district vis-a-vis our students.
Elisa, did you have anything you wanted to share? No, okay. I missed the reclassification ceremony. I had a family health issue that came up at the last minute. Really sad, because that's one of my favorite events of the year. Other than that, I have no reports.
Mine is just the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, which I think, as you said, both Catherine and Patrina did a wonderful job. Really great job, and great questions from parents and teachers that were on it. So very good.
Thank you. So we've already done 13.1. Rick, how do you want to take the rest of 13? Do you want to mush them all together? Or do you want to do them one by one?
Well, it's just for information.
Yeah.
For all of you. So items 13.2 through 7 are the first interim reports and the financial report for each of our independent charters that we provide oversight for Rocket Ship.
Rick, could you use your microphone? It's hard to hear you. Thank you.
It was very exciting stuff, Elise. 13.2 through 13.7 are the first interim report and the audited financial report for each of our independent charters that we provide oversight to. Rocket Ship, Redwood City, Vet Community Charter, and KIP. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them or get the answers for you. Otherwise, this is just for information.
That's good. The only question I had was that a couple of the audits had findings in it, and particularly the Connect one had a repeat finding. It seems around attendance for the after school program. I wasn't sure, are any of these findings things that we should be paying closer attention to or need to be concerned about?
I think for the majority of them, they have reasonable explanations on how they're going to continue to work to correct them. I'll work with staff too to make sure that we're doing check-ins with the charters to make sure that they're on track to their findings.
Haley actually did email me with a copy of what they submitted there, and they said that it had to do with the after school one had to do with the digital sign out sheets that they had being used improperly. So yeah.
Thank you for your work on that.
And thanks to the staff that provided these detailed analysis.
Item 14.1, correspondence.
Emails, yeah. One was speaker here tonight, staff from Henry Ford mostly.
I have a number of them, actually. I don't usually. So lots of staff and parent emails from the different schools regarding budget cuts. I think some that didn't go to everybody, but it was the same kind of general idea. I received a couple of, I think Cecilia was on it, an email from a parent from outside the district inquiring about inter-district transfers, so I just let her know what our policy is. I did receive an anonymous letter addressed to me from a parent regarding bullying at their school site. And John is going to follow up with the principal tomorrow. And then I also received a letter from Supervisor David Canepa. The Board of Supervisors passed a resolution regarding loneliness and asking the governor to appoint a minister of loneliness, and encouraging us to pass the same resolution. So I read it and it doesn't really apply much to school districts. I think John's gonna,
So what I'm gonna do is ask my other colleague
yeah.
if they got the same information. What are they planning on doing? It doesn't sound like something.
yeah,
Again,
it's more broad than school district, I think. So
Right, it even takes on,
seniors and,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
okay, I think that's the end of mine.
Yeah, I also think what I've noticed is a lot of the cities and county governments, they pass a lot of resolutions, you know, on kind of these important topics like loneliness, like whatever, whereas the school districts, we're typically doing resolutions that are more legally required, or if it's something that's really directly education related that we feel is really important, right? So yeah, I think you made some good points, Janet.
Anything else? Okay. Let's see, 15.1, possible other business suggested items for the future agenda. Hearing none.
Just the data ones that are coming up.
Okay. Changes to the board meeting calendar. I don't think,
No.
nothing, okay. It is 9:36. If there's a motion to adjourn. Or we
I
can sit
will
here.
make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Seconded.
Thank you, all those in favor.
Aye.
Thank you to the audience too. There's a number of you that stuck it out through this whole meeting, so appreciate
Good
you being
job.
here.
You get a cookie.